Speaker is Owen DeLong from Hurricane Electric.
Okay, well, as many of you may already know, Hurricane Electric runs a little bit of an IPv6 network, and we've got some v4 too. Our primary motivation for doing this is right here. You know, there's as of this morning 518 days left in the IPv4 free pool. The red arrow shows you about where we are in the run-out line, which is that red line counting down. We got a little bit more motivation in the form of this slide. You know, the top left is just sort of what happens in the dual stack world and what can and can't work. The one on the right is a process that's known as large-scale NAT or carrier-grade NAT, which involves a good bit of complexity that we thought looked a lot more complicated than implementing dual stack. And on the bottom is a slightly less egregious process known as dual stack light. That's the result of some work between Comcast and ISC, but we still thought that looked more complicated than dual stack. And basically, if you look at large scale NAT or dual stack, in the end we thought it looked a lot like this. So I'll move on. We looked at IPv4 runout and IPv6. We saw it more as inevitable rather than something that was possible. We didn't think it looked all that hard at the time when we started doing this. This was several years ago, before even I was with Hurricane Electric. It isn't that hard now. We viewed it as a learning opportunity, and we did learn. It's actually worked out pretty well for us. We were a reasonably small IPv4 provider, and we're now an IPv6 provider that's able to intimidate large providers with the mere delivery of a cake. So it's been pretty good for us. In a couple of years, we'll be able to continue business as usual, while our competition is probably going to be scrambling to get IPv6 going. We pretty much went through a process like this. It's a really rough outline. Plan, build a lab, learn from your lab. That's a really important part of the process. Try and break things in your lab. Try and do the unexpected. Try and do the unusual in the lab first, because guaranteed your customers will come up with something even more unusual in the real world. So if you've gotten at least somewhat used to the unusual things, it'll help you. Start adding v6 capability to your existing network. The network's the easiest part of this to deploy, and so do that first. You need it before you do the hosts anyway. Start adding IPv6 knowledge and awareness to your management applications. You know, your IP provisioning tools, your logging databases, your log parsers, all of those things. When they, you know, these funny colon-separated, really long numbers start showing up, you're no longer gonna be able to cast this stuff as a 32-bit int and get away with it. So plan accordingly. And then finally, add IPv6 capability to your public-facing services and content, and do some more testing. Ideally, before you put it on the main DNS names. More on that in a little bit later. In terms of DNS for your public-facing services and content, you can do that right away if you're brave. If you're not so brave, I recommend creating a new DNS view for certain clients that you want to test from, rather than creating new names. If you create new names, then what you end up with is situations where your web configuration files are set up for named virtuals, and you've either duplicated the config and something gets missed in the duplication, or it works on v6 with the special name, but then later when you go to use the real name, dual stack, something else breaks. It just creates all kinds of additional problems. So if you create a DNS view where you only give the quad A's to certain clients or certain resolvers, then you have a little bit more control over things, and your testing on the actual servers is more real-world testing. The server doesn't see a difference between a dual stack client and a v4 client. Map your test clients into the new view. Remember to try and get a mix of v4, v6, and dual stack clients in your testing environment if at all possible. And finally, test it. Make sure that the clients all have the same functionality they had before you dual stack things. Finally, add your IPv6 records to the new view and test again. So in summary, if you're brave, it's like flipping a switch that will allow you to get exactly what you want. And if you're timid, it's more of navigating the maze to get to v6. But there are lots of good reasons to want to navigate that maze. Lessons we learned. There's more documentation available if you start later, now being later, if you weren't aware of that. It's actually pretty good now. There's still room for improvement. Libraries do change. They probably won't change so much now, but they changed a lot when we started. Change is not always good or bad. Sometimes it's a little bit of both, and I think v6 is going to be definitely a mixed thing for most networks. In the long run, I think it's going to be really good. We're seeing a lot of advantages from it already at Hurricane. Router vendors are willing to experiment on your production network. Router vendors do not always know when they are experimenting. I think everybody understands that. I won't go into more detail on it unless you ask. Most of our lessons learned. Wow, these look a lot like the IPv4 lessons learned. Yeah, they are. There's a reason for that. IPv6 really is a lot more like IPv4 than it is different. There's a few differences that can be important, mostly in the stateless autoconf, which won't really affect web hosting providers all that much because you guys are mostly going to do static assignments anyway. But it is worth getting to know the stateless autoconf process. Whether you love it or whether you wish they'd done DHCP right is an exercise for the reader. Long-term address policy planning is a new discipline for the internet. We're used to going, okay, what do I need to do next year? How much do I need to get through this year? What can I do in the next 6 months? Well, in v6, we want to be looking more 5 years, 10 years out, and really saying how much addresses, how much address space will I need to never have to go ask for more? That's really, really a new discipline, and learn it, love it. It really makes life a lot better in the long run if we plan accordingly. And it looks wasteful up front now, I know, but trust me, there's enough for that kind of waste, and it's going to work out okay. Some other lessons we learned: if you get on the bus early, you might actually get to do some of the driving. The sooner you start, the more you know when others start to catch on. And life without NAT is good. Some vendor gotchas we ran into along the way. Juniper hides the IPv6 table in INET 6.0, and so for things like routing options and other rib and fib oriented operations, you have to remember to specify what table you're operating on. Otherwise, it will attempt to apply your configuration to the INET.0 table instead of the INET 6.0 table, and that may not do what you intended. Similar problem with Cisco, difference in their configuration language, but under BGP it defaults to putting all of your stuff into the family INET if you don't specify family INET 6. And it'll do that without giving you an error message, because you can do a lot of IPv6 route trading over an IPv4 BGP session on the Cisco in a way that can cause you a good deal of mental consternation later. So try and keep your v4 and v6 stuff cleanly separated in BGP if at all possible. Run your v4 across v4 sessions and your v6 across v6 sessions. It just makes life a lot more understandable when you're troubleshooting. And finally, on Force 10, there's a gotcha where the single cam cards that are probably most of the cards Force 10 has sold to date don't have enough cam to carry a full v4 routing table and even turn v6 on today. If you need a full v4 table and you want to do v6, you need at least dual cam cards in the Force 10 environment, and ideally quad cam. Unfortunately, Force 10 will tell you, yes, you can do that without a forklift upgrade. All you have to do is replace every blade in the chassis. So you get a non-forklift upgrade for the price of a forklift upgrade. What a bargain. And with that, I will turn it back over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Owen.